The Gen Z stare has become the latest generational stereotype to do the rounds on social media.
The Gen Z stare is when I walk up to the counter and you just stare at me like you're a bump on a log until I have to ask you if you're ready to take my order.
Previously, it was the cringe millennial core, Gen X Rise Up, and of course OK Boomer as memes. However, it is now time for the generation born between the years of 1997 and 2012 to have fun poked at them for a certain way of behaving, and in this instance, that would be the so-called Gen Z stare. It seems to happen whenever a young person interacts with a restaurant or retail establishment, and they always seem to hit with a silent stare instead of smiling or saying hello. It's a look that some say evokes judgment, apathy, and disinterest at the other, and it seems enough people have experienced it that they're complaining about it. So much so that you'll see many on social media detailing their exact experience with the Gen Z stare. However, at the end of the day, this exact Gen Z stare can be seen across multiple generations. If you look at exaggerated depictions of teenagers working in minimum wage jobs or even just existing from the 90s, aka Gen X and millennials, you'll often see them depicted as dumbly staring at whoever is talking and saying things like, "Whatever, man." The idea that younger generations don't care or are oblivious about what is going on around them is certainly not a new prospect, but it is definitely a meme that has transcended time. That being said, it could also be cultural. There's definitely different ways of going about customer service or retail in different countries. In Australia, if I go to fast food or a cafe and make an order, I don't expect the other person to be super friendly and treat me like royalty. I expect them to just get the food or coffee I want and serve it to me. They aren't getting paid enough to be extremely friendly all the time, so what might be normal for me might be rude to Americans, for example, who often rely on tips and generally expect people to be a bit over the top. So at the end of the day, this might just be an underpaid and overworked type deal people are coming into contact with, which is often the case for younger people in those roles. If you're being served by a young person working minimum wage and find them struggling to be friendly, or if they come into your establishment and aren't immediately perky and talkative, it is highly likely they're just exhausted. The point is that it's a stereotype because it's not a reliable way to describe an entire generation. There's also the boomer stare given when that older generation is asked to remove a card from an EFTPOS machine, as the blank rudeness is almost exactly the same, yet not every old person does it. As such, it's worth exploring and discussing the reasons why Gen Z has been saddled with such an unfortunate stereotype. Hey fellas, does Revolut have a deal for you? If you're based in Australia, the US or the UK, you can get 40 Aussie dollars, 20 US dollars or 20 pounds when you sign up to Revolut and use your card just once. I mean, who wouldn't want to use a card you could fully design yourself, complete with text, emojis, you name it. At least it won't be boring like the rest of them, eh? Head to the link in the description or scan this code here to check it out /learn more. You could even choose to upgrade to the metal plan to get this sleek stainless steel card. I never have to worry about my card getting snapped or broken because look at it, this thing is durable, man. And when you create an account, you'll get access to a range of perks to make money management a breeze. From smart budgeting tools and secure spending online to travel perks like currency exchange and discounted airport lounge passes. So don't forget, if you're based in Australia, the US or the UK, you can get 40 Aussie dollars, 20 US or 20 pounds when you sign up to Revolut and use your card just once. Head to the link in the description or scan the QR code to check Revolut out. Thanks again to Revolut for being today's sponsor. It's worth mentioning that Gen Z has been put through the meat grinder of social media for years. Their first nickname was Zoomers and were put at odds with the millennial 30-year-old boomers, depicted as wojaks with short back and sides haircuts, plus they were made fun of for doing the floss dance, then they were known as the face of the broccoli haircut, then they were made fun of for saying stuff like bussin' no cap for real. They also orchestrated the rise of e-girls, and in terms of posting described their digital humor as Zoomer humor or Gen Z humor, which was also known as 21st century humor, which overlapped with late millennial tastes.
Gen Z humor is so broken. Literally, all you have to do is take a random picture and then add a ton of bass boost to it, and then you just get cut off mid-sentence.
All in all, they've been quite prominent on the face of social media for a while now, and yet it could be argued that the big event that seems to define them is the COVID-19 pandemic. Many Gen Z feel shortchanged about the effect the pandemic and lockdowns had on their social and professional lives, as if they didn't get to experience the growth that occurs with partying, studying in an actual physical high school, as well as finding a job outside of it. It is this COVID period that is often attributed to causing the Gen Z stare, because it is usually blamed for a lack of social skills, the development of which was hampered by being forced to stay inside for so long whilst their youth wasted away. It meant that a generation that was born and raised during a time when the internet has always been a persistent aspect of their life was forced to really double down into it and live their lives through the filter of a screen. When the lockdowns hit, their only interactions with their peers was defined digitally, which would have led to increased feelings of loneliness and isolation. It became difficult to forge long-lasting relationships that relied on personal proximity, although I'm sure that digital relationships were forged too. This made many feel like their lives were set back a few years, as it did for the rest of the world, whereupon the early years of the 2020s felt like a blur. That being said, the fact that Gen Z has been now generalized as incapable of communication due to COVID and gives a particular stare when it comes to social interactions is a bit of an unfair generalization. Gen Z is, after all, comprised of human beings who are perfectly capable of integrating into regular society. Some of them have been in the workforce for quite some time now, even having kids and getting married. So, what's going on? Why is there so much hate toward this particular group? Well, it turns out that every generation is blamed for being ultimately terrible and worse than the one prior to it in some way, and whilst this channel has covered generational beefs before, it is now time to do so in the context of the Zoomer. Boomers were laughed at, millennials were laughed at, even the often forgotten Gen X was laughed at, and now it's Gen Z's turn. The idea that Gen Z has bad manners has been around way longer than you might imagine. It would seem that anyone alive was told that their generation sucks by those older than them at some point, so no one can say that their particular cohort is perfect. Gen Z as a generation have been made fun of a lot, actually, as it seems the internet has compounded the ability of older generations to shit on newer ones tenfold. A decade ago, it was millennials that were in the spotlight for being too sensitive, too narcissistic, and lacking basic manners, and at the time they were the largest online demographic. Now that Gen Z takes that throne, you can see the exact parallels with the Gen Z stare, as they're accused of lacking social skills and only focusing on themselves. It'll happen again with Gen Alpha, as they're called iPad kids by Gen Z already, which also implies a certain level of narcissism and social obliviousness echoed by prior generations. In short, the Gen Z stare has become a stand-in accusation of poor manners for the young generation. Many use the isolative consequences of COVID-19 as a pseudoscientific way to explain these anecdotal accusations of not being friendly and lacking social skills. However, it can be observed that almost every generation is accused of exactly the same problem in some way, and it's easy to go back through media and see examples of the Gen Z stare manifesting in older demographics as teenagers. Even the boomers have their own version of the Gen Z stare, which happens when they are asked to take a card out of an EFTPOS machine. As a result, the Gen Z stare has become another trend, making fun of the demographic born between the years of 1997 to 2012, and yet it is clear that the next generation, Gen Alpha, have already had the label of iPad kids thrust upon them as the cycle continues well into the future. What meme would you guys like me to give a lesson in next? Let me know in the comments below.
And remember, like and subscribe! Or else.